May 20th, 1943. North Atlantic, roughly 400 miles west of Ireland. Night has swallowed the convoy. The sea is black glass, broken only by the pale seams of bow waves and the ghostly silhouettes of merchant ships plowing eastward. Their navigation lights are doused. Only the dimmest slivers of hooded lamps glow along the decks. Above, the sky is low and starless, a uniform slab of cloud that presses down on steel and nerve alike. On the flank of the convoy, a Royal Navy destroyer escort, lean, sharp, restless, saws through the swell, spray whips over her forecastle as she heels into the wind. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, unseen periscopes and diesel fumes lurk in the dark. A U-boat wolfpack, hunting tonnage and hoping for a gap in the screen. Deep inside the destroyer, behind a watertight door stenciled "Wireless" in white paint, the sea sounds like a distant, constant growl. The compartment is cramped and hot, air dense with tobacco smoke and the faint tang of ozone. Green light spills from a single shaded lamp and from the round, glowing face of a cathode ray tube bolted into a steel rack of equipment. Leading telegrapher William Bill Hargreaves hunches over that screen, headphones cupping his ears, one thumb hooked under the headband to relieve the pressure. In front of him is what, at first glance, looks like an ordinary shortwave receiver, knobs for tuning, dials for gain and frequency, but above it, the strange instrument the sailors have learned to trust, the HF-DF set, Huff-Duff, a high-frequency direction finder that can turn a brief flicker of radio noise into a compass bearing. Wikipedia, +2. Wikipedia, +2. On the oscilloscope, a bright trace hangs like a tilted ellipse, trembling with atmospheric static. A circular scale is painted around the glass, marked in degrees. A metal cursor, a slender hairline, can be swung across the face with a small control wheel beneath Bill's fingers. He glances at the clock bolted overhead. 0:17 hours. The headphones crackle. For a heartbeat, there's only hiss, then a sharp, staccato chatter of Morse code bursts into life, high-pitched and clinical. It's not one of theirs. Bill freezes, then snaps into motion, left hand spinning the tuning dial, right hand steadying the cursor. German, high frequency. Short, tight groups of dots and dashes, a Kurzsignale, one of those ultra-brief contact reports the Kriegsmarine uses so the U-boats can speak to headquarters without staying on the air for long. Once, that brevity made them almost impossible to track. With older direction-finding gear, you needed half a minute or more of transmission to swing a loop antenna, hunt for the null, and estimate a bearing. Wikipedia, +1. But this isn't the old system anymore. Bill's eyes flick to the scope. The trace has snapped into a clean shape, brightening and narrowing as the signal locks in. The pattern shifts with the phase of the wave, but to his trained eye, it all points one way. He nudges the cursor until it bisects the longest axis of the glowing smear. There, bearing steady. "Got him," Bill mutters, half to himself. He thumbs the talk key on the voice tube by his elbow. W-T to bridge. HF-DF, contact. Enemy transmission on 8.6 megacycles. Bearing 065 degrees relative, sir. Strong signal, short message. Up in the destroyer's wheelhouse, the captain, Commander Allen, Royal Navy, cups the brass speaking tube to his ear. The red light of the chart room spills over his shoulder. Outside, the wind claws at the open bridge, flinging wet cold into every gap in his greatcoat. "Say again, 065 relative?" he replies. "Aye, sir. 065. Strong as a church bell." Allen doesn't need a lecture on what that means. A U-boat, somewhere out in the dark, is talking to Bishopdu U-boat command, guiding the rest of the pack onto the convoy's track. The radiomen ashore in Britain and Iceland will be hearing it too, their own Huff-Duff stations plotting lines on charts, but this destroyer doesn't have the luxury of waiting for a signal from land. On escorts like his, HF, DF sets have been fitted specifically so they can pounce on transmitting U-boats in real time, turning the hunters into the hunted. Wikipedia. +2. Wikipedia. +2. He leans over the chart and draws a quick pencil line. From his ship's symbol, 065 degrees. The convoy is smack in the middle of that fan of danger. Hard a starboard, he snaps to the helmsman. Come to course 180. Increase to 20 knots. The destroyer responds like a greyhound tugged on a leash. Decks tilt, steel groans, and the bow swings, cutting across the convoy's track. Men in duffel coats grab for railings as the ship claws into a new heading, her wake foaming bright behind her. On another escort, half a dozen miles away on the opposite flank, a second HF-DF set catches the same German transmission. Their operator calls up a bearing of 035 degrees relative. Two lines, from two ships, cross in the black, somewhere ahead, and to starboard of the convoy, a rough fix on the U-boat's position. It's not perfect, but it shrinks the haystack. In the plotting room of the convoy Commodore's flagship, grease pencils scribble arcs over a transparent screen. When the bearings from shipboard Huff-Duff agree with the reports coming in via wireless from distant shore stations, tall adcock antenna arrays ringed around the Atlantic, a pattern emerges. The wolfpack isn't just out there somewhere. It's here, in this slice of ocean, at this moment. Wikipedia. +2. U-boat.net. +2. The Commodore gives simple life or death orders. A discreet alteration, of course, for the convoy. Just a few degrees. Slow enough that big merchant hulls can manage it. Subtle enough that any shadowing periscope might not notice the gradual curve. On the destroyer's bridge, Alan doesn't wait. He's already driving down that Huff-Duff bearing like a hound on scent, eyes peeled for the faintest silhouette against the horizon, a conning tower, a wake, the brief spark of a signal lamp. Radar might miss a low, wet target in this sea state. ASDIC can't reach a boat that's still on the surface. But a sloppy, overconfident radio transmission has painted a ghostly arrow on the waves, and Alan intends to follow it. Back in the wireless room, the transmission dies abruptly. The scope's trace slackens into a diffused glow, then settles back into noise. Bill exhales, finally aware that his shoulders have been locked up around his ears. "Short one," his mate says, dangling a cigarette. "Too short for the old loop jobs, eh?" Bill half smiles. "Good thing some boffin figured out how to catch lightning bolts on a screen," he says, tapping the side of the cathode ray tube. "Else we'd be blind." He says it as a joke, but it's true. Years before this night, far from the Atlantic and its murderous math of tonnage and torpedoes, a handful of researchers had been tinkering with radio sets for a very different reason, trying to track thunderstorms, to measure the crackle of atmospherics in the sky. They weren't hunting U-boats. They weren't thinking about convoys. Yet in their experiments lay the seed of the device now guiding steel and lives through the dark. Wikipedia. Out on deck, spray continues to lash the gun shields. The convoy plods on, unaware of the invisible net that just twitched and tightened around a careless submarine captain. Somewhere ahead, depth charges are being rolled to the rails, fuses set, men bracing for the concussion. All of it, the course change, the onrushing destroyer, the chance that hundreds of merchant sailors will see another dawn, traces back to a small, almost accidental insight in a quiet laboratory, years and miles away from the roar of the Atlantic. That is where this story truly begins. Autumn 1926. Ditton Park, near Slough, England. Rain came in sideways across the Buckinghamshire fields, hammering the windows of the low brick laboratory. Outside, 4 tall masts, the Adcock aerial, loomed against a flickering sky, black spears stabbing into clouds alive with distant lightning. Inside, among benches cluttered with coils, valves, and soldering irons, the air smelled of hot dust and shellac. Robert Watson Watt rubbed a sleeve across his spectacles and leaned toward the newest prize in the room, a pale green glass screen, set into a metal box, humming faintly. A Bell Labs WE-224 cathode ray oscilloscope, the latest import, its electron beam ready to paint invisible radio waves as light. Wikipedia. "Jock, are we ready?" he called over his shoulder. J.F. Jock Hurd, his assistant in the atmospherics branch, tightened the last binding post on a pair of coaxial leads. The cables vanished through a wall bushing and out toward the Adcock array, 4 vertical masts wired to act like 2 great virtual loops, north-south and east-west. Hurd straightened, wiped his hands on his lab coat, and came to stand beside his chief. Wikipedia. "As ready as we'll ever be, sir," Hurd said. "Storm's busy over the channel. If there's a night for lightning, this is it." Watson Watt nodded. "Good. Let's see if we can make the sky draw its own map for once." He flicked switches with ritual care. The oscilloscope spot brightened in the center of the screen. The 2 amplified antenna feeds, one into the X plates, one into the Y, were idle for now, just a shiver of noise. Somewhere far away, a thunderhead flashed, its electrical violence spraying radio noise across the long-wave and shortwave bands. Until now, the lab had only been able to average the roar of that static, guessing at storm positions over hours. Tonight, they were hunting individual strikes. Wikipedia. +1. For a minute, nothing happened. Just the hiss and crackle in the headphones around Hurd's neck, the gentle sizzle of valves warming. You could almost forget that every tick of the wall clock marked an explosion of charge somewhere over Europe. Then the storm spoke. A sharp crack burst in Hurd's phones, a single spheric, the radio scream of a lightning stroke. On the oscilloscope, the central dot exploded into a streak. Not a simple vertical line, but an oval, a tilted ellipse of light that flared, wobbled, and slowly faded as the phosphor held its ghost. "There," Hurd blurted. "Did you see that?" Watson Watt was already leaning in, his pencil tracing the long axis of the ellipse on the glass. It lay like a thrown spear, its tips pointing toward one corner of the circular scale he'd inked around the face. That angle, that was the direction from which the pulse had arrived, not averaged over minutes, but from a single lightning strike. Wikipedia. "Again," he murmured. "Let's have another." As if on cue, the storm obliged. Another spheric, another glowing ellipse, this one tilting slightly more to the east. Hurd watched, eyes wide, as their scribbled calibration marks lined up with reality. North-south, east-west. The 2 virtual loops of the Adcock antenna feeding the oscilloscope gave the pulse a shape, and the shape betrayed its direction. "It's instantaneous," Hurd said. "No loops to rotate, no hunting for nulls, no mechanical goniometer. Just," he snapped his fingers, "a flash. An instantaneous direct reading radio goniometer," Watson Watt said slowly, tasting the phrase. He wrote it on the margin of his notebook, underlining it twice. "And if it can catch a lightning stroke that lasts 1,000th of a second, then any man who thinks a 20-second transmission is too short to find is in for a disappointment." Wikipedia. For the next hour, the 2 men worked in near silence. Lightning boomed somewhere beyond the rain, and each unseen bolt etched its brief signature on the screen. Hurd called out angles. Watson Watt compared them with known storm positions from other stations. The numbers agreed more often than not. The sky, reluctantly, was giving up its secrets. But even as he marked bearings, Watson Watt's mind wandered ahead of the thunderheads. Pilots, he thought. Ships at sea. Any craft with a transmitter, betraying its presence with a shout into the ether. If he could build a system that made thunderstorms visible, he could do the same for radios. "You're smiling, sir," Hurd said, catching the look. "Just thinking," Watson Watt replied. "Today it's storms. Tomorrow, perhaps. Anything that speaks too loudly on high frequency." A few months later, the same oscilloscope sat on a wheeled stand in a drafty conference room in London. The Air Ministry's walls were lined with maps. The men at the table wore pinstripes and service blue. Watson Watt, hair askew, gestured at the screen as another recorded signal traced out an ellipse. "Gentlemen, you see the advantage," he said. "No moving loops, no minute-long hunts, a cathode ray tube, and the proper aerial arrangement, and you have a bearing on signals as brief as 1 millisecond. Think of navigation aids. Think of locating distress calls. Think of—" "We are thinking," one senior official cut in dryly, "of budgets, Doctor. This is clever wireless work, I grant you, but we already have direction-finding sets in service. Bellini Tosi, loop aerials." He waved a dismissive hand. "Perhaps meteorology will have more use for this lightning toy of yours." "Toy," Hurd muttered under his breath as the meeting broke up. Still, the work did not die. At small outstations and in discrete corners of Fighter Command's doubting system, HF direction-finding sets began to appear, tied into the same logic that would soon turn radar plots into interception orders. During the Battle of Britain, WAAF operators in concrete huts listened to fighter pilots' radios crackle and watched Huff-Duff needles swing, their bearings helping controllers keep squadrons pointed toward incoming raids. Wikipedia. It was useful, it was clever, but to most eyes, it remained a specialty instrument, one more wire and valve trick in a war suddenly full of them. Radar towers were more impressive, codebreakers more glamorous. Downriver at the Admiralty, in a cigar-fogged room near Whitehall, the same green glow played across another oscilloscope face. Around the table sat naval officers with salt-stained caps and engineers from the Admiralty Signal Establishment. A chart of the North Atlantic lay pinned to the wall, its shipping lanes scarred with red grease pencil lines where U-boats had struck. "So," a captain said, tapping ash into a tray, "you're telling us we can point this thing at the ocean and hear a submarine?" "Not hear it, exactly," replied one of the engineers, sliding a photograph of an Adcock mast array across the table. "But when a U-boat transmits to its headquarters, even for a few seconds, this arrangement," he tapped the masts, "and a cathode ray display give you an instant bearing. No need to rotate anything. From shore stations, you can triangulate. From ships, you can at least run down the bearing." Wikipedia. +1. A commander frowned. "On a ship? With all that steel and rigging twisting the wavefront? Our existing direction finders are bad enough. I've been told shipborne HF-DF is impossible." Wikipedia. +1. "It's difficult," the engineer admitted. "The superstructure distorts the signals. But with calibration-known test transmissions from a second vessel, correction cards for each frequency, it is not impossible. You already have high-frequency receivers aboard your escorts. We add the aerials, the amplifiers, the tube, and a trained rating. Ordinary wireless rooms become direction-finding posts." Wikipedia. +1. The captain leaned back, considering. Outside, the war was turning ugly in the Atlantic. Convoys were vanishing. Tonnage graphs climbed like bad fevers. "Very well," he said at last. "Fit a few sets. The newest destroyers, perhaps some corvettes. We'll see if your Huff-Duff," he tried the slang term on his tongue, "earns its keep. But don't expect miracles. ASDIC and depth charges will still do the real work." The engineer nodded, hiding a flicker of frustration. To the men who owned the ships, Huff-Duff was a clever adjunct, a niche trick that might, at best, tidy up the edges of their existing anti-submarine warfare. The real faith and the real budgets still flowed towards sonar, guns, and escort numbers. Yet out in the dockyards, new masthead aerials began to appear on convoy escorts. In cramped wireless rooms, ratings like Bill Hargreaves would soon sit down at their sets, the same kind of ordinary HF receivers they'd always used now, with a glowing circle of glass bolted on top. The net was being strung, wire by wire, without most of the men who would one day trust it quite realizing what they were weaving. Spring 1942. Gladstone Dock, Liverpool. Rain slicks the cobbles and beads on the gray flank of a tired escort sloop moored alongside. Her hull carries the grime of too many hard crossings, her paint scoured by Atlantic salt. On the upper deck, welders' arcs flare as dockyard hands fit a new, spidery frame of metal tubing high above the bridge, a curious cage that wasn't in the original plans. In a cramped corner of the wireless office, a thin man with a Polish accent is wedged between racks of equipment, frowning at an oscilloscope. Wasła Struzinski runs a hand through his hair, then taps the glass with a bitten fingernail. Wikipedia. +1. The bearing's off again, he says, annoyed more with the ship than with the men. Look. Leading telegrapher Bill Hargreaves, younger, not yet hollow-eyed from too many night watches, leans over his shoulder. The ellipse on the screen is bright and neat, the cursor lined up carefully. Yet the white-clad petty officer standing at the chart table shakes his head. Reference ship reports us at 090 degrees true, the petty officer says. You're showing 107. Struzinski exhales. Because your ship, he says, stabbing a finger toward the deck under their feet, is made of steel, steel that bends the wavefront. The signal comes in straight, your masts and superstructure twist it. If you trust this, he wraps the oscilloscope. Without correction, you chase ghosts. Wikipedia. +1. He straightens and looks at Bill. Again, we go round the compass. Out beyond the harbor mouth, a second vessel circles slowly at a fixed distance, transmitting steady HF signals at agreed frequencies. Every few degrees of the escort's heading, Bill notes the raw bearing the Huff-Duff gives, while the petty officer jots the true bearing from the reference ship. The difference, that maddening distortion, is what Struzinski wants. By dusk, his notebook is full of numbers. He sits at the mess table with a slide rule and a mug of lukewarm tea, turning columns of figures into a printed correction card. For the set a chart of how many degrees to add or subtract at each frequency and heading. It is, in essence, a map of how this particular ship lies to radio waves. Wikipedia. +1. When he's done, he hands the card to Bill like passing over a compass rose. Now, he says quietly, when the submarine captain thinks he is clever, sending very short messages, and your oscilloscope shows you a bearing, you will know what to trust. Not his cleverness. Not your first reading. This. Bill tucks the card into a clip beside the scope, suddenly aware that a piece of card and ink might mean life or death for men he hasn't met yet. Summer 1942. Western approaches command, Derby House, Liverpool. In the windowless operations room, the air tastes of cigarettes, sweat, and stale tea. A great horizontal plotting table dominates the center, the North Atlantic spread out under glass. Wren plotters push tiny ship symbols along grease pencil tracks. Colored strings mark convoy routes. On a raised dais, officers in headset watch the dance of war inch across the ocean. At the back wall, a smaller team huddles around a separate chart, this one pinpricked with colored arrows radiating from marks labeled Ford End, Anstruther, Bauer, Goonhavern, and more. Each arrow is a bearing taken by a shore-based HF-DF station, the thin radios of Britain, listening day and night for German signals. Wikipedia. +1. A young lieutenant from the Y service steps forward, tapping a cluster of intersecting arrows. Sir, we've multiple Kurzsignale from U-boat transmitters here, he says, tracing a rough box in mid-Atlantic. Bearings from 3 shore stations cross in this area. And look, he lifts a fresh slip of paper. Escorts ONS 122 report shipborne Huff-Duff bearings that line up within 10 degrees. That's a pack, not just a lone boat. Wikipedia. +2. naval-history.net. +2. The senior staff officer in charge of routing gray at the temples, shirt sleeves rolled, rubs his eyes. On the main plot, Convoy ONS 122 is a slow procession of dots inching west along the standard lane. The pencil box of likely U-boat positions lies dead ahead. So they're waiting on the line, he mutters. A proper wolf's net this time. He pauses for only a second, then nods to the plotters. Alter route, 20 miles north over the next 12 hours, he orders. Incremental course changes. No sudden jogs. Send diversion orders in merchant code, and for God's sake, no plain language. On the glass, the string representing the convoy's future path is nudged gently upward to an eye that isn't looking for it. Nothing much has changed. To a U-boat captain who thinks he's guessed the convoy's lane, everything will. In the quiet that follows, the WREN plotter glances at the smaller chart again at the spray of HF, DF bearings converging on the wolfpack's hunting ground. Do they know? She asks under her breath. The men on those boats, do they know we just stepped around them? Not yet, the Y Service lieutenant replies. But some night, when their signals betray them and a destroyer comes roaring down that line, they'll suspect something. Autumn 1942, North Atlantic, night. Wind tears, low clouds to shreds. Convoy SC-104 pushes eastward, its escorts dancing around it like sheepdogs around a flock. On one of the destroyers, now a veteran of half a dozen crossings, Bill Hargreaves is at his Huff-Duff post, headphones biting into skin, rubbed raw by constant use. The room vibrates with the drumbeat of engines. Somewhere overhead, boots clatter. Outside, a signal lamp clicks Morse between escorts. But in Bill's universe, the only thing that matters is the hiss in his ears and the ghostly smear of light on the oscilloscope. Static, static. Another Allied call sign. More static. Then a different note, higher pitched, clipped. He recognizes the rhythm before his brain does the Morse. German hand on the key. A U-boat throwing a contact report into the ether. Bill's hands move without conscious thought. He flicks the tuning knob, sharpens the signal, swings the cursor until the ellipse lies neatly along it. The correction card waits at the edge of his vision. He reads the tiny printed line for this frequency and heading and adds the numbers in his head. Bearing 083 relative. Corrected. He barks into the voice tube. Strong. Short transmission. On the bridge, the escort's captain doesn't ask how the corrections are made. He doesn't need to know about Straczynski, or Ditton Park, or the way lightning once danced on a lab oscilloscope. He only knows that when his Huff-Duff rating calls a bearing now, convoys live and U-boats die. Wikipedia. +2. naval-history.net. +2. Very good, he says coolly. Alter course to run down that line. Stand by depth charges. Radar to keep a sharp eye to starboard. The destroyer heels, charging into the dark along an invisible arrow drawn by electrons. 20 minutes later, radar picks up a small contact, a blip low on the sea, just where the Huff-Duff bearing suggested. A U-boat captain, finishing his transmission and swinging around to rejoin his pack, never sees the dark shape bearing down on him until star shells burst and white light turns his world to day. As ASDIC pings roll out and depth charges thunder into the sea, you can trace each explosion back to that first, almost accidental insight that lightning's scream could be given a direction on glass. From boffin toy to quiet killer, Huff-Duff has become something no convoy can safely sail without. The first depth charge goes off too close. In the German U-boat's radio room, the world becomes noise and dust. Lamps blow out. The bulkhead flexes like a drum, and Oberfunkmat Karl Neumann is thrown across his key. The headphones rip from his ears as the boat heels hard to port, diving, everything loose, turned into shrapnel in the red gloom. Silent running! Rue! The captain's voice roars from the control room. Pumps whine, men curse, gauges tremble. Somewhere aft, a man screams and is cut off by the slam of a watertight door. Carl hauls himself upright, fingers still tingling from the last transmission. He sent a brief Kurzsignale contact report. just as the training manuals demanded. 20 seconds on the air, maybe less. Long enough to give Bisham-Dew their convoy's position. Long enough, apparently, for a British destroyer to come raging down the Bering like a bloodhound. Wikipedia. +2. Wikipedia. +2. He forces his breathing to slow, listening past the ringing in his ears. Another pattern of explosions rumbles through the hull, farther away this time. The captain has taken them deep and off course, trying to slide out from under the barrage. In the control room, under the glowing dials, the captain grips the chart table with white-knuckled hands. "They were on us too fast," he mutters to his first officer. "We transmit once," and minutes later, he jerks his chin upward toward the storm of explosives above. "Radar can't see us underwater. ASDIC needs time. So how?" "Perhaps a fluke, Herr Kaluun," the first officer offers, though he doesn't sound convinced. The captain says nothing. Somewhere in his mind, a quiet, unwelcome idea stirs, that the old assurances from signals officers in Paris that the enemy's direction finders are too slow to catch Kurt's signale might no longer be true. Wikipedia. +1. Weeks later, hundreds of miles away in occupied France, that same doubt hangs over a long table in a dim room at Bisham-Dew headquarters. The walls are plastered with convoy tracks and U-boat patrol lines. Smoked glasses and ashtrays litter the map. Staff officers stand around a cluster of reports: U-boats lost, patrols aborted, captains complaining of escorts that appear from nowhere shortly after radio transmissions. Dönitz himself is not here today, but his questions loom over every discussion. Why are we losing more boats? Why are our packs being skirted? A signal specialist, spectacles low on his nose, points to a memorandum from earlier in the war. "Our assessment remains," he says stiffly. "The British Bellini-Tosi loop direction finders require long transmissions and manual rotation. Our short signals are too brief. It must be radar or treachery in our codes." Wikipedia. He does not know, cannot know, that the British have long since moved past rotating loops and slow hunts for nulls. That in small huts on windy headlands from Canada to Scotland to West Africa, HF, DF operators sit before cathode ray tubes and Adcock aerials, catching even the shortest of U-boat transmissions and turning them into instant bearings. That the Allied network of high-frequency direction-finding posts now numbers dozens of stations across the Atlantic, feeding bearings to plotting rooms in London, Washington, and Ottawa within seconds of a signal breaking the air. Wikipedia. +2. Document. Pub. +2. So Bisham-Dew's directives remain much the same. Maintain discipline, keep transmissions short, trust in Enigma and Kurzsignale. Out at sea, captains like Karl's commander cling to those orders, even as their gut tells them something in the ether has turned against them. Early 1943. Derby House, Liverpool Western Approaches Command. Down in the bunker beneath the city streets, the air is thick and warm despite the concrete walls. The main operations room hums with low-voiced orders and the clatter of croupier sticks on the big Atlantic plot. On a raised platform, an officer from routing watches two dramas at once: convoys inching along penciled tracks, and the sudden flare of fresh HF-DF bearings on a separate, smaller table. liverpoolmuseums.org.uk. +1. A wren with ink-stained fingers draws a new line from a tiny symbol labeled Mullion, a coastal HF-DF station, out into the mid-ocean. Another line joins it from a Canadian post, a third from the Azores. The three bearings crisscross in a tight little diamond. Next to her, a Y Service lieutenant pins a small red flag on the point where they meet. "There's your wolf," he says quietly. "At least one boat, probably more. They've been chattering tonight." The routing officer nods, eyes already flicking to the main plot, where a slow, eastbound convoy is about to plow straight into that diamond. "Signal the convoy, Commodore," he says. incremental diversion 10, then another 10 over the next watch. And tell the escort group commander he's got sharks off his bow. He can choose to go round them or through them. Up on the surface of the North Atlantic, the message crackles across ordinary HF sets in the wheelhouses and wireless rooms of merchantmen and escorts alike. The sets themselves are nothing special. They're the same high-frequency radios everyone uses to talk across the ocean. But now, tied into Adcock aerials and cathode ray direction finders, there are also ears in a hunting net that stretches from every convoy out to every listening post on 3 continents. Wikipedia +2. Wikipedia +2. On one of the escorts, spray lashing her bow, Bill Hargreaves folds the diversion signal and tucks it under a clip by his Huff-Duff scope. So they've picked up chatter ashore, his captain says, glancing at the message. And you'll catch the loudmouths in our patch. Yes, sir, Bill replies. Around his headphones, the sea's roar fades. Static and distant Morse take its place. Somewhere in that hiss, he knows, a German radioman will eventually key up to ask Bichondieu for new instructions to report a sighting, to confirm a patrol line. Bill just has to be ready when he does. By now, most escort groups have at least 1, often 2 ships with HF-DF sets installed, their crews trained, their correction cards worn soft at the edges. It's become standard kit, as expected as ASDIC and radar on a serious anti-submarine vessel. When one escort gets a bearing, the other can get a cross-fix. When shore stations call in angles, Derby House can see the whole pack. Wikipedia +2. usni.org +2. The effect isn't dramatic in a single night. There are no lightning bolts of revelation, no magic button that sinks submarines on command. Instead, voyage after voyage, course alteration after course alteration, the numbers begin to lean the other way. Convoys slip past waiting packs that never quite find them. U-boats forced to dive when a destroyer comes charging down an HF-DF, bearing lose contact and never regain it. When they do manage to attack, reinforced escorts guided partly by HF-DF harry them with radar, ASDIC, and depth charges until steel tubes crumple on the seabed. Wikipedia +2. nzhistory.gov.t.nz +2. Later, analysts will argue over graphs and dates and turning points. Some will point to the spring of 1943, when sinkings of Allied ships plummeted and U-boat losses spiked, as the moment the tide truly turned in the Atlantic. Others will talk about long-range aircraft, escort carriers, better weapons, broken codes. All of them will be right. But in the quiet corners of signals intelligence, another statistic will stand out, that perhaps a quarter of all U-boats destroyed in the war owed their fate, in part, to bearings taken on fleeting radio transmissions, to Huff-Duff operators ashore and at sea catching whistles in the static and turning them into lines on a chart. Wikipedia +2. usni.org +2. For Bill, for the WREN at Derby House, for Carl clinging to the rails of his battered U-boat, those numbers don't exist yet. They know only the night in front of them, the hiss in the headphones, the glow on the glass, the knowledge that every time someone, somewhere, presses a transmit key, invisible threads tighten across the ocean. What began as a way to watch thunderstorms has become a web that can strangle a wolfpack. Ordinary radios, the same boxes of valves and knobs that once merely carried voices, are now the bait and the sensor, both prey and trap. And in 1943, for the first time in years, the Atlantic feels a little less like a graveyard and a little more like a road that might actually stay open. May 10th, 1945. Loch Erebol, northern Scotland. The war in Europe is 3 days dead, but the Highland sky still looks like a battlefield. Low clouds, jagged, torn by wind. In the long, gray finger of the sea loch, Royal Navy escorts sit at anchor in 2 neat lines, signal flags stirred by the gusts. Beyond them, Coming in one by one under armed guard are the ghosts of a long, cruel war. German U-boats, decks crowded with stiff-backed men in worn black leather. On the deck of a weather-beaten destroyer, Bill Hargreaves stands by the rail in his best blues and watches U-boat number after U-boat nose into position. Their guns are unmanned, breeches locked open. Their wireless masts are bare. The white ensign flies over them now. Beside the destroyer's bridge, the HF-DF aerial rises in its odd metal cage, paint flaking, guy wires humming faintly in the wind. Below it, behind a familiar watertight door, the wireless room is almost quiet, for the first time in years. Only a few routine signals trickling through. No wolfpack chatter, no frantic convoy calls. The oscilloscope sits dark, its circular face reflecting Bill's silhouette when he glances in. Feels wrong, her being quiet, a younger telegrapher says behind him. Like a church with no bells. Bill smiles thinly. She's earned the rest. They fall silent as another U-boat comes alongside the buoy opposite. Its conning tower bears the faded outline of a rearing horse, white under streaks of rust. The crew stand in two ranks, faces pale in the North Sea light. At their head, the captain raises his cap stiffly toward the British officers on the receiving ship. The ceremony is brief, impersonal. There have been too many deaths on both sides for anything else. Bill finds his eyes drawn, not to the men, but to the stub of the surrendered boat's radio aerial, just a short, weathered mast now. Somewhere in its coils and insulators, he imagines, the last signals of a losing war still cling like ghosts. He wonders if their radiomen ever realized that each clipped, disciplined message was a torch in the dark for Allied ears. Funny, the young telegrapher says. All those times I cursed that static, and it's what got us here. Static and a few clever heads in labs, Bill replies, and a lot of luck. He doesn't say the names Watson, Watt, Straczynski, but they flicker at the back of his mind like call signs. He remembers the first time he'd seen the ellipse leap into life on the screen, remembers Straczynski's long fingers tapping glass in a Liverpool dock, remembers nights when a single bearing had meant the difference between a convoy slipping by or blowing apart under orange blossoms of fire. He also remembers the ones they missed, the times the line on the chart came too late, or the U-boat captain stayed disciplined and silent, or a freak ionospheric skip threw the bearing wide. The net had never been perfect. It had just, slowly, become good enough. Weeks later, in a quiet office far from any sea, another man sits with a stack of reports in front of him. The war has made his hair grayer. His jackets hang a little looser on his frame. Robert Watson Watt turns a page and adjusts his spectacles. The report is dense, all tables and sober prose. The contribution of high-frequency direction finding to anti-submarine warfare. Somewhere in the middle, there is a paragraph summarizing the figures: how many bearings taken, how many convoy diversions ordered, how many U-boats attacked after HF-DF contact. There is even an estimate, cautious, that perhaps 1 in 4 U-boats destroyed owed something to those fleeting lines drawn from cathode ray tubes and adcock masts. He reads it all, then lets the paper fall closed, mind drifting back to Ditton Park, to the smell of ozone and damp wool, to Hurd's delighted shout as the first lightning stroke painted its ellipse on the screen. They had wanted to locate thunderstorms, to give meteorologists better maps. He had not imagined, then, a destroyer charging down a bearing in the black Atlantic night, had not pictured men like Bill, headphones biting, breath held as a U-boat signal burst and died, had not thought of U-boat captains flinching in the red gloom of their control rooms as depth charges rolled down steel rails above them. Unintended consequences, he murmurs, sometimes the better kind. On his desk, a letter from the Admiralty thanks him and his colleagues for their invaluable contributions to the winning of the Battle of the Atlantic. It is formal, brisk, the ink already fading. The real monument, he knows, is not in words, but in the convoys that arrived, the cities that did not starve, the invasion fleets that sailed because the sea lanes stayed open just long enough. Years later, on a peacetime liner cutting across a calm Atlantic, ordinary passengers stand at the rail with drinks in hand, watching gulls wheel in the wake. Somewhere below decks, radio officers tend sleek, modern sets that hum across frequencies once jammed with war. There is no Huff-Duff aerial on the mast now. Direction finding has moved on, tucked into compact instruments, overshadowed by newer marvels. If you listen, really listen, there is still static under the music and the chatter and the weather forecasts. The ocean still hisses and crackles in the ether. In a small house in the north of England, Bill, no longer a leading telegrapher, just Mr. Hargreaves, now keeps a battered notebook in a drawer. Between grocery lists and family addresses, there are pages of cramped handwriting, frequencies, bearings, convoy codes. A faded correction card is tucked between them, the corners gone soft. Sometimes, on stormy nights, he takes it out and runs a thumb over the ink, remembering the glow of the scope and the feel of the ship rolling under his feet. He tells his grandchildren stories when they ask, not the worst of it. Mostly the oddities, mugs sliding off mess tables in a gale, a flock of birds landing on the gun barrels, the time a frozen wave nearly carried a signalman over the side. Once, though, when a thunderstorm rolls over the town and the house lights flicker, he finds himself explaining how lightning sounds in headphones, how it looks, squashed into an ellipse of light on green glass. "So you chased submarines with lightning?" his eldest granddaughter asks, eyes bright. He laughs. "Not quite, but it started there. Some clever people worked out how to see where a storm was. Then, someone else thought, if we can see where the storm is, maybe we can see where a radio is. And the submarines, well, they talked on the radio when they shouldn't have. Then what? Then we listened," he says simply. "We listened, and we drew lines on charts, and sometimes that was enough." He doesn't talk about Enigma or escort carriers or very long-range liberators swooping low over gray swells. Those are other people's stories. His was the nights when ordinary radios, the same sort you could use to talk to shore or home, suddenly became something more nodes in a web strung invisibly across an ocean. From a lab watching thunderstorms, to a bunker in Liverpool, to a destroyer bucking through black Atlantic swells, one accidental discovery had turned static into bearings, bearings into decisions, and decisions into ships that arrived, and lives that were not lost at sea. Out on the ocean, freighters still cross from continent to continent, their cargoes mundane and peaceful. The men and women in their radio rooms may never have heard of Huff-Duff. They don't have to. The war it helped decide is over. The net is gone. But in the quiet crackle at the edge of every transmission, in that background hiss we barely notice anymore, there's an echo of the time when a faint, fleeting signal could decide whether a convoy lived or died. And if you could stand again in that cramped wireless room in 1943, with the sea growling outside and the scope's green light on your hands, you'd feel it. The moment when the ellipse snaps bright, the cursor lines up, and a simple, ordinary radio becomes a weapon sharp enough to turn the tide of a war.